you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering tech companies cutting diversity, equity, and inclusion programs by 90%. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. From CNBC, tech companies like Google and Meta make cuts to DEI programs in 2023 after big promises in prior years. From the Washington Examiner, DEI on the decline in big tech 3 years after George Floyd's death. From the HRDirector.com, are Chief Diversity Officer roles disappearing? From SHRM, yes, they are. And by the way, why are DEI roles disappearing? From Human Resource Officer Today, DEI fatigue on the rise. And from Forbes, is DEI officially dead? Maybe not officially, but it's definitely in some trouble. Shortly after the death of George Floyd, Google was among many tech companies that set up new programs aimed at supporting Black employees. The goal, CEO Sundar Pichai wrote, was, quote, to build sustainable equity for Google's Black Plus community and externally to make our products and programs helpful in the moments that matters most to Black users. Google's vocal commitments included improving representation of underrepresented groups in leadership by 30% by 2025. More than doubling the number of Black workers at non-senior levels by 2025, addressing representation issues in hiring, retention, and promotions, and establishing better support for the mental and physical health for Black employees. If that sounds a little bit racist to you, like, why are you so focused on only providing for certain employees of certain skin colors? Then you've pretty much picked up on the problem with diversity, equity, and inclusion. It includes only certain races and excludes others. The move was part of a broader trend in the wake of George Floyd, which sparked social unrest and drew attention to the power imbalances in corporate America and the tech industry specifically. Corporations pledged to invest millions of dollars to improve diversity in their ranks and support external groups doing work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But in 2023, some of those programs are in retreat. By mid-2023, DEI-related job postings had declined 44% from the same time a year prior, according to data provided by job site Indeed. In November 2023, the last full month for which data was available, it dropped 23% year over year. First a 44% drop, then a 23% drop. Obviously, it's going down. That's a sharp contrast with the period from 2020 to 2021, whose postings expanded by nearly 30%. In line with this broader trend, both Google and Meta have cut staffers and downsized programs that fell under DEI investment. This year's cuts also impacted smaller third-party organizations who counted on big tech clients for work, despite the continued growth of those tech giants. Quote, whenever there's an economic downturn in tech, some of the first budgets that are cut are in DEI. But I don't think we've seen such stark contrast as this year, said Melinda Briana Epler, founder and CEO of Empovia, which advises companies and leaders to use a research-based culture of equality. Well, obviously, that is not something that produces any productive financial results or helps the company competitively in any way. So at some point, these companies see this and they say, yeah, we're making money, but we can't really even afford this, not as an expense. As an expense, they can afford it. As a distraction to management, they can't afford it. The most precious thing in a company is management attention. It's not money. It's not even customers or quality. All those things are very important to run a business. But the management needs to focus on what it is they're trying to do, whether it's taking on opportunities or more often than not problem solving. They need to have the capacity to take these things on and focus on them. All of your important employees, all your managers who are trying to keep the thing running and have them focus on something other than business operations. It's a massive distraction. It costs a tremendous amount of money and creates a whole bunch of new problems. Even the simple business rule of solving a problem when it's small rather than when it gets big, you don't have time for that if you're distracted by woke diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense. Quote, when George Floyd began to become the topic of conversations, companies and executives doubled down on their commitments, and here we are only a couple of years later, and folks are looking for opportunities to cut those teams, said Devika Bridge, CEO of Bridge the Gap Consulting, very cute name, which works with tech companies' DEI efforts. Bridge said some of her clients had cut their DEI budgets by as much as 90% by mid-year. However, more than just broken promises are at stake, experts told CNBC in a series of interviews. The cuts come at a time when technology companies are forging ahead on the biggest technology shift in a decade: artificial intelligence. If diverse people are not included in AI development, that may result in even greater power imbalances for both corporate workers as well as consumers who will use their products. This concept that it depends on what your skin color is to determine if you should be involved with artificial intelligence development, I really don't see it. Artificial intelligence is complicated and really doesn't rely on cultural backgrounds, gender, or sexual preferences. It does rely a lot on who's programming it and what you're using as sources for true information. Quote, "Our commitment to DEI remains at the center of who we are as a company," a Meta spokesperson wrote in a statement to CNBC. Quote, "We continue to intentionally design equitable and fair practices to drive progress across our people, product, policy, and partnership pillars." Quote, "Our workforce reductions and company-wide efforts to sharpen our focus span the breadth of our business," said a Google spokesperson, saying that the company remains committed to underrepresented communities and DEI work. Quote, "To be absolutely clear, our commitment to that work has not changed. We invested in many new programs and partnerships this year." The Google spokesperson did not dispute any specifics in this story, but pointed to new investments in partnerships this year, including committing more than $5 million to historically Black colleges and universities to help build a stronger pipeline to the tech industry for underrepresented talent, and launching the Google for Startups Women Founders Fund to help women entrepreneurs. In addition, though, they have cuts to a lot of internal teams and programs. In 2021, after facing complaints about pay equity in its engineering residency program, Google said it would be sunsetting the program and replacing it with a new one called Early Career Immersion, or ECI, which is aimed at helping underrepresented talent develop skills. Google said, though, that canceling the engineering residency program was an unrelated business decision. But Google decided not to hire a 2023 cohort of ECI software engineers, citing an uncertain hiring outlook, and it also laid off some staffers associated with the program. Participants in a separate Google program called Apprenticeships also lodged complaints about a lack of pathways and pay inequities in the last year. Quote, "Apprentices become part of our mission to build great products for every user, and their different experiences help ensure our products are as diverse as our users. But apprenticeships participants complained they were getting paid less than other engineers during the course of the 20-month program despite doing similar work. They said they were doing level 3 work with L3 expectations and contributing significantly to Google's code base while earning half of full-time L3 software engineers' base salary, and that's just not fair. If they're doing the same work but they're not regular employees and it's an apprenticeship program, you really don't get paid very well in an apprenticeship program. Some of the work you do when you're new or in like an internship is garbage work. It's a distraction for your bosses. Some of the work is going to be good work. Particularly people who don't belong there but are there anyway are going to do terrible work, waste a lot of time. So if you come in and you're part of an apprenticeship or an internship program, no, if your work is high quality, you're not going to get paid as well as the full-time staffers that do the same work, but eventually you'll get an opportunity to be a full-time staffer. This is how it's always worked throughout all of recorded history. The apprentices even confronted the executive sponsor of the program, the vice president of Google Workspace, pointing out the executive's prior stated goal to increase representation of underrepresented talent across Google. Google said that the apprentices are paid a salary for the learning and training they receive as part of the program, and that it reviews compensation annually to ensure alignment with the market. The apprenticeships program, which included real-work job training for underrepresented backgrounds, followed other failed efforts to improve diversity. In 2021, for instance, Google said it shut down a long-running program aimed at entry-level engineers from underrepresented backgrounds after participants said it enforced, quote, "systemic pay inequities." That same year, CNBC found the company's separate program that worked with students from historically Black colleges suffered extreme disorganization, racism, and broken promises to students. Google and Meta also made cuts to personnel who were in charge of recruiting underrepresented people, according to several sources and documentation. Nearly every member of Meta's Sourcer Development Program, more than 60 workers, was let go from the company as part of its layoff of over 11,000 workers. They claim to have received inferior severance packages compared with other workers who were laid off in the same time period. Meta's Sourcer Development Program was intended to help workers from diverse backgrounds obtain careers in corporate technology recruiting. Google also cut DEI leaders who worked with Chief Diversity Officer Melanie Parker, while Meta made cuts to several DEI managers, some of whom were hired just in 2020. Layoffs at Google and Meta also included employees who held leadership roles in their respective Black employee resource groups known as ERGs. Quote, there's a lowering of physiological safety with layoffs or impending layoffs, and holding ERGs accountable for that is not fair and can lead to even more burnout, Epler said. In addition to cutting staff who worked on DEI programs and ERGs, both Meta and Google cut planned learning and development training for underrepresented talent. Meta said that learning and development programs were, quote, merely streamlined to make them more impactful. Quote, there's a consistent amount of folks who have completely failed, mostly because they don't have the internal teams to keep the mission forward, said Simone White, who is Senior Vice President at Blavity, a media organization that focuses on content for the Black community, and puts on Afrotech, which became a popular tech conference for Black tech talent and companies seeking to hire them. I guess there's just a limit to the amount of subsidies even tech companies are willing to throw at things like this. Either come into that job with the right attitude and ready to work, or apparently you're not going to keep it. Doesn't matter what your skin color is. Cuts impacting external organizations. While internal DEI programs have suffered, the cuts were arguably even harder for external organizations who expected the same amount of corporate sponsorship and support from tech companies in 2023 as they had in the prior few years. In early 2023, big tech leaders, including Google and Meta, were among companies that lessened their work with third parties that were counting on projects, according to several organizations. Bridge, CEO of Bridge the Gap Consulting, explained how the steep cuts have affected her firm, which consults with companies on building an effective workforce for underrepresented workers and includes workshops and programs. Quote, right now, with these budgets being entirely limited or cut, we're just really backpedaling on so much of the work that we've done. Bridge said some companies have even asked her to provide work for free. Now Bridge is starting to understand what the value is of what it is that she's selling. I mean, they can write her a check as a donation or something like this, but basically if they're going to say, look, why don't you give us some free work? What they're saying is what you're doing might be nice or something, but it's not of any commercial value to the company. Quote, a lot of companies we work with start to make progress before the cuts, Epler said. Now it's like some of them are essentially wiping away that work because the work was not productive. This is equivalent to bringing in an outside consultant to teach your employees how to finger paint. They could do a lot of beautiful finger paints. You can put those pictures up on your refrigerator, but it's not going to necessarily generate any business for the company. And it would be a distraction because you're not supposed to be finger painting when you're going to work for some kind of a company that's producing a product or a service. This is not summer camp. Stefania Pomponi, founder of Hella Social Impact, said executives have blamed cost-cutting as they've canceled contracts with the firm, which consults with companies' leadership to create more inclusive workplaces through programs and training. Quote, I've been telling them, look, your bottom line is also your people, and these types of cuts are going to impact your business, Pomponi said, pointing to various studies on diverse teams producing higher performance outcomes. You're not going to fool sophisticated companies with these phony baloney reports. I see these in these articles all the time. Look, I've got this study that says this. I've got that study that says that. It's nonsense. It really doesn't have an impact. The most speculative companies are tech companies. Google spends billions on development. Even Amazon spends billions on research and development. They're willing to spend unlimited amounts of money on things that might have a positive impact or make them more competitive in the future. None of this stuff adds anything to the company. It's all a distraction. It all creates friction. And a lot of this kind of stuff, companies are starting to get lawsuits over. It's enough already. Quote, as I talk to my colleagues across the space, some of the monies that were set aside around the time of George Floyd's death have not been fully extended. And that says to me that organizations like ours are needed now more than ever, said Brenda Wilkinson, CEO of Anti-B.org, which puts on Grace Hopper, the largest women's tech conference, which took place in September. Some tech companies, including Meta, Pulled back from sponsorship or attendance for employees to attend Grace Hopper 2023, some companies, including Microsoft, ended up sending some leaders to attend virtually so they wouldn't have to pay for travel. It's unfortunate that so many people got distracted by this and even started to make businesses and careers out of offering consulting services for this, because it really adds nothing to a company's culture, its workforce. It only creates a distraction and creates problems for the company. People need to move into other careers. Other companies, such as Google, which still had a presence at the conference, retracted travel for some employees who had previously been approved to attend. Google is also among companies to reduce their spending with Blavity, the organization that puts on Afrotech. Quote, "We do have a significant amount of our existing corporate partners that are telling us, hey, we can't participate this year because our DEI team doesn't even exist anymore," said Blavity's Simone White, who declined to name specific companies. "Week to week, we have new contacts at companies, and folks we work with for years to organize this work are no longer there. Quote, to say our progress is not in peril would not be truthful," Wilkinson said, although she's optimistic the tide could turn around in 2024. Quote, "We're working with multiple challenges in our society, so we have made a lot of the progress, but some of that was erased in the last year. Then you have this backlash against racial reckoning." The backlash she referred to includes things like the Supreme Court's decision to end affirmative action at colleges, as well as backlash against DEI programs in conservative circles. Quote, "You have this wokeism drama," Wilkinson said, pointing to Florida legislation such as banning books and downplaying Black history, as well as laws impacting the LGBT community. Because of that backlash, 2023 will be the last year the organization will hold Grace Hopper in Florida, Wilkinson said. A Meta spokesperson said that it increased its engagement with some third-party organizations, such as the Executive Leadership Council, which aims to increase Black leadership in C-suites, diversity, equity, inclusion, and artificial intelligence. Wilkinson was among experts who told CNBC that DEI work is more important than ever, given the growing work on artificial intelligence, which hit breakneck speed in 2023. Quote, "We're in a big technology inflection point, and what happens is, as AI begins to take off, and if organizations are less inclusive, the product is not reflective of the users," Wilkinson said, clearly not an artificial intelligence expert. Apple, Google, and other tech giants are still grappling with displaying and identifying images accurately. A New York Times investigation this year found Apple and Google's Android software, which underpins most of the world's smartphones, turned off the ability to visually search for primates for fear of labeling a person as an animal. But we know that AI is trained on historic data, and the historic data is missing critical segments of the population, and having women and non-centered folks as decision makers is going to be critical to making sure it doesn't happen again. White said companies who made cuts this year may have a difficult time building future relationships with DEI stakeholders, and it may impact their ability to attract and retain talent should they decide to build up again in the future. I'm sure anytime they're ready to write a check, there will be several consultants willing to accept that check. I don't think that's going to be a concern. Quote, "Younger generations increasingly care who has a seat at the table," White said. Quote, "And they're going to remember who did what they said they were going to do." It's looking like the beginning of the end for diversity, equity, and inclusion in business, and it's essentially because it's a massive distraction. You really can't afford to have massive distractions in business. You can have the occasional holiday, you can take a vacation, but you can't tell people you need to change your staffing, you need to change your products, you need to change your promotions, you need to exclude qualified people as well from working at your company because it fits some kind of social justice agenda. There's no business case for it. It's rare to even see them try to make a business case for it. Diversity, equity, and inclusion must go. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.